All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Dr. Langer.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Most of these things I've done virtually and they don't show up. I'll do it face to face. I think it's a lot better.
Fair. If you just don't mind speaking a little closer to the microphone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came from Toronto to interview a number of people, but I came to New York specifically to speak with you at Lennox Hill. The way I first found out about you, and I'm sure my audience probably knows about you, is from your Netflix series, Lennox Hill. We'll get to that in a second. But what I think is even more interesting is that you came here. Like now, just sitting in your office, just having wait for you to finish in the OR. I was just looking around, and there's a number of awards and all these things. You clearly could have gone anywhere after medical school to do your neurosurgery practice. What brought you here to Lennox Hill?
I didn't come here. I came to a series of, I almost made like a series of mistakes. They weren't each mistakes, but my original decision to leave UPenn was probably not a good one. I had a great situation there. I had a good lab and had a great career plan. I'd been there for almost 20 years. And my boss, my chairman, who I trained with at the very last minute, after he offered me a job there, decided to leave and come to New York. Ended up moving to a different hospital. I ended up at Lennox. It's the fourth hospital I've been in. And I came here after being in three other places that I felt were, one closed. The first one, actually, they sold it for condominiums.
Oh, wow.
And then the next one was, had issue. I was there for 6 years and ran into some kind of career-altering problems. And then I moved to the Northwell system in 2010. I went out to North Shore, and I just didn't like reverse commuting. And I saw my life taking a route that I was considering too much about maybe the wrong things, and that I was so focused on the physical act of doing surgery and having the right cases, and I was less aware of some of the factors in my life that were important, and I wanted to be working and living in Manhattan.
Okay, yeah. So in doing some research about Lennox Hill, you guys are top hospital in the country, especially for neurosurgery. But it wasn't always that way until yourself and Dr. John Bookfar kind of came aboard. So what inspired you to come here and turn Lennox Hill into what it is right now?
Well, I'd be kidding you if I told you that I knew we were going to do this well. I mean, I was pretty confident. I'm very self-confident. I know I'm very, skilled at what I do. There are a lot of great neurosurgeons in New York City, though. I just wanted to go to a place that I could start from scratch and that had a great location, not necessarily the best physical plant, but if it was a great location and a great physical plant, there probably would have been somebody here already,
Right.
And there'd been a series of the biggest hospitals in Manhattan had come here with trying to take it over, and they ended up just sending like a junior guy in to sort of sit here and send the cases back to the mothership. They really didn't make a commitment to the hospital. And when North Shore LIJ, which is now called Northwell, bought Lennox Hill in 2010, I knew that having worked in Manhattan, I knew what the potential was. I didn't come here right away because for a number of reasons, I wanted to work at North Shore proper, which was out in Manhasset. And but after working there for a few years, I realized that this is a real opportunity. If I had surrounded myself with good people, we have a good chance to do some great things. And I think John Bookfar's coming was a major puzzle piece.
Right.
He really validated the fact that someone like him would leave Cornell and come to Lennox Hill Hospital and join me.
The way you phrase it on the show is fun. You're like, who the hell would leave Cornell?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people ask, they still ask him that. But John's very proud of it. That's what I love about him. I mean, he's a good, one of my best friends and just a incredibly unique person. And I think I wonder if he had not come, what would have happened? I think we would have been as successful. I don't think we would have been as successful as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that John fulfilled the niche, his brain tumor business, and some of the things he does were very, very important and something we can do very well here at Lennox Hill. So, I think it was John clearly gave us the validation on sort of the outward side, but there were also a lot of people that we recruited, the nursing staff, the PA staff, the the administrative leader. There's so many components to a department when you have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I sort of tapped into a lot of the people that I met during my years at these other hospitals. That was the lucky thing.
Mm-hmm.
Had I just come here out of the blue, without having been in New York for so long, I wouldn't have been able to recruit some of the people that I did. I mean, Rafael Ortiz, he actually came here before I did. We talked about coming here when we were back at Roosevelt Hospital, which is now Mount Sinai West. And we talked about coming here together. He just got here first. And then I was trying to claw and then I brought him into the department, and I brought Mitch over with John. And then we had, a group of PAs that we recruited my chief PA at North Shore, I recruited to come here as our chief PA. And there's so many components to a department that are necessary for it to function besides the attendings. You can have great attendings. For example, the first few years were really hard. We saw a lot of bad outcomes. There were people who suffered because of our ambition. Frankly, I mean, on the way up, when I think one of the best. We're one of the best places in the world for neurosurgery, no question. But I couldn't have said that when we got here. So what does that mean? It means that we made mistakes, and our team had to learn. We had to learn how to cooperate, how to communicate, how to recognize problems, and we had to fix them. And so there were undoubtedly some people along the way that suffered. But I could live with that because I know that now that we're saving some lives that wouldn't have been saved.
Right. And
I also think that I don't think we're any worse than any other place we started. I think we were working probably harder then than we are now. I can, rest. Not that I ever rest, but we back then, I think there were just so many moving parts and so much chaos. And we put so many things into place for safety and for communication, which are all these components of things. Just training the OR techs and the ICU staff.
Right.
And we had to recruit a whole cadre of intensivists and build an ICU. I mean, train ICU nurses. I mean, think about all this. It's just a huge number of pieces of Swiss cheese you have to plug in to block all the holes.
Yeah, it almost sounds like starting a startup from the ground up and then building it all the way up. So it sounds like you were like a key piece in kind of like drawing other people in. How do you inspire people to come and do work that they won't see the fruit for 10 more years?
Well, I think I've learned a lot about being a leader. I can't tell you that I knew what I was doing. I was certainly much more. I think I was less humble when I first got here than I am now.
In what ways?
I think it's important to be a servant leader, and you have to give up a lot to get something. And I think you have to recognize that you have to be an enabler. You have to be someone that fills the holes that are missing, and find a way to make people the best they can be, and just do what you can to do that. I didn't understand that, but actually mechanically doing that and giving, the feeling in the pit of my stomach when I was giving things up was a lot harder, admittedly, 6 or 7 years ago than it is now. I had to, John, for example, is a huge puzzle piece, and you have to make room. I think of building a department in two ways: as a puzzle,
okay,
and as a what's it called? I always have a brain freeze when they put the thing that hangs over a baby's crib. It's some little arms on it. A mobile.
Yes.
I think of the department as two pieces. That in a two-dimensional world, it's a puzzle piece. It's puzzle pieces in a puzzle. In a three-dimensional world, it's a mobile.
Okay.
So the puzzle piece analogy is that everybody's piece is different.
Yeah.
But you got to keep it square. So you're putting people together and molding something into a puzzle, but the puzzle pieces don't perfectly fit, and so things overlap, and the pieces don't quite go together.
Right.
But over time, people shift, and you squeeze, and you turn, you maybe cut a little something off.
Yeah.
So you got to get those puzzle pieces to fit. It's never perfectly square, and the puzzle pieces are always a little off.
Mm-hmm.
But the key thing is to keep it flat. The flatter you can keep it, the square you can keep it, then you got the game going. So that's one kind of version. And so John had a big puzzle piece, very complicated puzzle piece. His piece interacted with me. I mean, we do certain things very similarly. Our skill sets are similar. If he does a case that I like to do, that's him doing it, or I'm doing it. So these things, we all as neurosurgeons like to operate. So each of us overlapped a little bit. Me with Mitch Levine, and me with Rafael Ortiz, and me with John. We were the core four. We had to get started, but then we had our junior people recruited, Griffin and Jason and Randy. each of the different subspecialties, which is tumor, spine, and vascular. And so this kind of horizontalness and puzzle pieceness, it's a constant effort. The mobile thing is that we got to keep the department centered, the center of gravity of the department. Some people are way far out there on the mobile and are really heavy. So then you have to have a counterweight to them on the other side. And so the
heavy in terms of ego or in terms of what?
Well, it could be needs, it could be ego, it could be what they require to be happy. Some people are really easy and just kind of get along and never complain and just do the work. And some of our guys are much like that. Others need a little bit more like, come on, you can't do that. I got to reel them in a little bit and pull them closer to the center.
Yeah.
And all those things balance. And as a leader, I think those are the two ways to think about it. And you get better at it as you go on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people know that I'm honest and that I'm relatively unselfish, and that I think John's success and then Jason Ellis's success, or when junior people are successful, it's attractive to other people. I also think New York City is like the fifth partner. There's people want to live here, young people.
Fair.
If this was in, I don't know, any other city, I don't think it would be as attractive. Why would people go to Lennox Hill Hospital? It was a community hospital, and it was, it's old, and there's no new building here. And you're one of the most competitive cities on earth for neurosurgery. Like, why would you come here? And the reason is because certainly once we proved that we could do it, we set the stake in the ground and we built a great team. You inspire other people, say, oh, wow, these guys are really serious. And this is a different environment. This is like a startup. This is like Tesla.
Yeah, kind of.
And so when that happens, you attract other people and they feel that the energy and the support. There's nothing like this, just the environment, the culture, the way we treat one another, I think. It's hard to maintain as we've gotten bigger. People move along. All the guys have their own career ambitions, and
right.
It's hard sometimes to make sure that everyone feels as successful, certainly as I do. And my job is to make sure that my success feeds back to them, that they feel as happy and as fulfilled as I do. And that's not always easy sometimes.
Right. Just listening to you take that call, I can tell you're very invested in your patients in a way that it almost seemed like you were talking to like your cousin or your brother or something. You just getting out of the OR and giving that update. So I can tell the level of commitment and dedication that you have to your career is second to none. And I'm just curious, as you're speaking about developing Lennox Hill and all the guys and the location and the resources and getting all the staff here. How did that lead to that Netflix special? Because I think all of that comes through really well on the show, and I think it did really well for that reason. It was received really well because you got to see a behind the curtains kind of look at what a neurosurgical team looks like. But I also think that the characters on the show, your team, are unique in that. So how did that come to be?
Look, John and I are very unique. That goes without saying. There are a few elements. A lot of it is luck. Some of it is confidence and doing the right thing. It started with us doing the right thing and knowing that we were the real deal. We have nothing to hide. I would let anybody in here, and we know that we make mistakes. We aren't perfect. We have issues. Everyone has issues. We don't always agree with everything, but the ultimate baseline here is incredible. And the commitment to doing the right thing to an extreme. A lot of this starts with our contract structure. The other thing you have to recognize is that medicine is a fee-for-service business still. And whether you're getting paid per dollar for every case or being measured by what's called a relative value unit or an RVU, almost all the departments up until recently, you got paid more the more you did. And you were direct competition with your partners. If you're in a department and that guy's busier, he's doing more cases, and I want to do that case. And so you're always looking over your shoulder what the other guys are doing. And so from the very beginning, I worked hard to get our contracts straightened out so that all of us have a fixed amount of income, no matter what we do. So,
really?
Yeah. We are basically paid X dollars period. We have a 10% bonus. It's based on like patient experience stuff,
Right.
not on cases. And so it's working very well. There are problems with it over the long term that I'm learning about, but that was the essence. And so that's what allowed us to create this kind of collaborative culture, because a case I did didn't mean John wasn't doing it, for example, or vice versa. And so people like each other because there's not this inherent competition. So that's one piece. So I think it started with that. It's not all about money, though. And I think that we have a certain type of person that's here that's successful in that environment, not driven for the same reason. So there's an element of culture and structure in the culture. I knew we had a great culture, just to start. I knew that anybody came in here would be like, that's a cool place. I knew John was an incredibly emotionally intelligent guy, and the sky's the limit. He's entertaining, he's unique, he's good looking, he's all the things that make him as attractive as he is as a character. The next thing was, look, I trained an Israeli fellow at North Shore when I was there for just 6 months. I was on my way to come here, actually, when Erez showed up. And Erez Nosek was an Israeli fighter pilot who became a neurosurgeon, who was my fellow, meaning he was finished his residency training, and he was working extra with me when I was at North Shore. And I was actually back and forth between North Shore and Lennox already. I never really fully committed to working with him because I wasn't there all the time, but there was something about him to me and me to him. We just really got along really well. And I know I respected him tremendously, and he respected me tremendously. And when I left, I ended up trying to help him get a job actually to come here. It got blocked for some political reasons, and then he ended up going to Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn. He's now at NYU, unfortunately, because now he's competing with us. But he was in the show. The same Israeli film team, Ruthie Schatz and Adi Barish, who are married, made a show in Israel that they filmed in like 2013 and 2014 called Ichilon, which is a big hospital in Tel Aviv. And Erez was in that show. And it was it was so successful in Israel that they said, we got to go to New York to make it in America. And Ruthie streaming back then was just starting. I mean, Netflix wasn't what it was now, and certainly there was no Amazon and Apple and all these other shows, other companies. It was basically like Nat Geo and maybe, outside, one of these other cable networks. So Ruthie and Ani moved to the city in 2017. They tracked Erez down because they kept in touch with them. They said, Erez, we really want to do a show in New York. Can you help us? He goes, I can't do it. He was a junior attending at Maimonides Hospital. There's no way he's getting this through their administration. It's just too complicated. He didn't have the gravitas. He didn't have the kind of experience and the leadership there. He wasn't going to be able to go to the CEO and say, I want to do this. And so he said, you ought to call my friend Dave. So Ruthie and Adi called me, and I was fearless. We have to do this for a number of reasons. We're the real deal. Obviously, we're super confident. I knew if they came here, they'd see some amazing stuff. And we were the underdog in New York City.
Right.
So if there's a show, I didn't know it was going to be Netflix at the time. That's the thing. It was just, we're going to do a docu-series on you. It's like, okay, that sounds great. So the next thing was I had to sort of get it through our hospital administration. There had been a thing called New York Med just a year or two before, like in 2015, that was a huge disaster. Columbia got sued, lost like a $5 million lawsuit because they recorded somebody in the background who was dying and the family heard it and blah, blah, blah. Oh. So everybody's super gun shy about doing these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I had to convince the CEO of our health system to let me do it. And I'd had a good relationship with him, and I explained why, and then I worked backwards. So I started at the top. So Michael said we could do it. So I went to marketing, to legal, to patient experience, to the unions had to get involved because all our nurses are in unions. I had to get the hospital leadership here to agree to it. Then I had to convince Ruthie and Adi. Originally they wanted to do more, maybe the whole hospital. And I said, I didn't think that would be smart. Knowing they did screen testing with a number of different people. Ultimately, I thought it should be life and death in Manhattan with Lennox Hill obstetrics and with neurosurgery. It turns out the no OB attending would join it. None of the obstetric. Everyone's I think there's a couple of things. One, people are afraid of, somebody's going to sue me.
Right.
Super anxious. And that's because I think there are people who are doing fraudulent stuff. Honestly, I think if you're not the real deal, you probably don't want people in and see it as only a negative.
Right.
or you're just uncomfortable because what if they see me screw up? I'm not afraid of that. That's the biggest problem. The public thinks we're supposed to be perfect. That was the reason for doing it. It was part of the reason for doing it. I knew we'd have some screw ups. I mean, it could be too bad, but I think that was not unintentional. I think that the other thing is that you have to recognize that there are ways to screw up that are unintentional. You have all the right intent, but just like I'm sure the Columbia didn't mean to record somebody. So we went beyond to do all this HIPAA compliance stuff. People were signed up, and they would never film people behind us. And then after they did all the filming, they went through every single view. We went through the people, the background, who they were. We had to track them down if they didn't fill out a form. I think we had over 1,500 people sign HIPAA compliant.
Wow.
Patient release forms. So it was a combination of things. I didn't ask for it. We didn't know it was going to be on Netflix at the time. Once we agreed to do it with their team, then it was Ruth Iannotti who had to pitch the show. And when I heard it was going to be on Netflix, I told my wife, she's like, I don't think my wife really believed me until it came out. Like I kept telling her about it. She's like, yeah, right. It was one of these, for some reason, this stuff happens to me. I have a lot of faults. I do. I'm a little disorganized. I am very, I'm super optimistic to a fault. I take risks. I trust people. I sometimes have a little ADD, doing too many things all at once. And so I think she thought maybe this was another one of kind of some sort of craziness that I got myself into. But when we saw the trailer, I just couldn't believe it. It is one of the best, most sort of impactful things that's ever happened to me. Well, not so much for the attention, but the validation. The attention's, it's not tearing out celebrities, not so great. It's okay. I mean, it's fun. It's your ego just feels good for a second. That's I always use the analogy of like chewing gum. It tastes good while you're on, and then it sort of runs out and you get another piece of
the blue check mark on Instagram gets old. Right?
Yeah, it's like I mean, it's John has a blue check on Twitter. I don't give a crap. So, in the end, I think that it's been very. If only that it's shown me what's important, and it's also allowed me to have a voice. It's allowed medical students to hear that never would have impact on. Also, COVID was so good because everyone got into virtual conferencing, and we've impacted thousands and thousands of students who reached out to us. We had 16,000 kids who signed up for our summer internship.
Yeah, I was one of them. Amazing.
Yeah. So the impact, we wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that, nope. Right? So all these other, now I'm getting a chance to talk about our department and this type of success and how to think about life. I'm actually writing a book. I've gotten really into stoicism, on the philosophy of stoicism. And I really feel that that's what I want to spend the next part of my career doing is demystifying some of this, really encouraging, smart, talented, hardworking people to be neurosurgeons or to be doctors at least, and be a human being. And that's have a little bit of that in them, and nothing wrong with that. So,
wow, that's I don't mean to come across as nosy, but I noticed you had Marcus Aurelius on your desk. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you mentioned that you're writing a book on stoicism. What are the qualities that you look for in a successful neurosurgeon? Because you said that when you were younger, maybe you were ambitious to a fault, and now you still acknowledge certain flaws in yourself. You said you're overly optimistic, and maybe you take too many risks. And then you've kind of, towards the latter half of your career now, you're like, just be a human. So what do you look for in someone that you think can stick it out here, is intelligent enough to make it, and will supersede their own ego and be able to be a good physician? What do you look for?
First of all, I'd be lying to you if I really knew what I was looking for. Some of it's really hard to pin down. I think, as an example, there was a woman who was a medical student at our medical school at the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra, Northwell, it's called. who was all set to be an obstetrician.
Mm-hmm.
And she showed up the first day. She's 1 week of neurosurgery rotation. That's it. So she was all set on being an obstetrician. And she came up to the OR with me, and I introduced myself. We talked on the way up. She says her brother's an obstetrician, and she's also to do this, and she's angling. And she only has 6 more months before it's going to happen or so. Not like a ton of time, or where she's going to apply for residency. And I said, okay, well then when you're here, you should just be an observer. Just this is a fun week for you. It's just to see what neurosurgeons do.
Yeah.
So I went to the operating room. She followed me in, and it was unlike most medical students who come and sort of stand there kind of with their arms back and don't do much. And it's fine. That's what they do. She scrubbed in like without even asking. She started the scrub sink next to me. Scrub's like, okay, it's pretty fine. It's great you're scrubbing it. And not only that, but she grabbed a sucker, and she had a natural tendency. There was something just about her body language and the way her self-confidence, her initiative, no one's going to be a great neurosurgeon when they show up, right? You have no idea. We don't have no way of testing how your hands are, or it's important you're self-confident, but you're not an egomaniac. There's a difference. It means you're okay to take risks and fail. So it means that you're not going to, obstacles are not a terrible thing. And these all are very stoic things, by the way. That's basically the tenets of stoicism. They start to get into why I found stoicism so impactful, but she was perfect. I was like, Sharon, why are you doing obstetrics? We started getting into a conversation. And that was a Monday or a Tuesday.
Yeah.
By the end of the week, she was pretty much set on doing neurosurgery. And in fact, she did a rotation, signed up for another, and she's now going to be a neurosurgeon.
No way.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All from that one week of shadowing you.
Yep. And
That's fantastic.
I think that not every medical student does that.
Right.
And not, what was also neat about it was it was a woman, and there wasn't much between us as far as we didn't have that much in common necessarily. However, I do feel that some of the traits of someone who can be successful can come out in a relatively short period of time. It has to do with what you don't say sometimes. It has to do with how you ask a question. It has to do with your body language and some of it has to do with self-confidence and the ability to ask, not be right, and to say, I don't know, and be comfortable with that.
Right.
I talk about, in my day, I'm writing this about this, that mostly men, it's almost uniformly men, went into neurosurgery for chicks, money, ego. It's like, I'm a neurosurgeon, and, big swaggering thing.
We have, pretty cool.
Yeah, we have a ton of those people in our business. We have a lot of sociopaths. We have a lot of egomaniac narcissists. And unfortunately, a lot of those traits that make this field attractive only get worse once you become a neurosurgeon. And that's why a lot of our leaders aren't great. That's why I heard I listened to the Daily Stoic, which is a Ryan Holiday, his podcast. He's talking about that the same factors that make you a leader, that get you moving up the food chain, like the gold star stuff, are just the opposite of the things that make you a great leader very often.
Oh.
Because think about it. You have to be selfish. Right. You have to be probably listen to other people. And I don't agree with that. I'm doing it my way. You have to be really ambitious. You have to get people to recognize you and give you credit. And you have to have a great CV and all these things, like these gold star things that you have to check that box. And the whole way we become doctors is like that. From your SATs to your MCATs to your residency, where you go to residency, and the research you do, and the papers you write, and what your titles are, and blah, 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 and how many pages your CV, and how many papers and book chapters. It's insane.
Right.
And then those have nothing to do with what's going to make you a great leader or a great chairman for that matter. There's no relationship, zero.
Right.
Because if you think about it, why would you being so successful as an individual have anything to do about how you build a great team? There's absolutely no correlation. And we do a terrible job at this. We do a terrible job of the way we pick our residents and the nature of the way we choose people. And it's a problem. And I think going back to what I'm on this earth for now, one of my closest friends is a very ambitious guy. He's the chairman of neurosurgery at the Barrow Neurological Institute. His name's Mike Lawton. And Mike is, in generationally, I think, is probably the most well-known neurosurgeon of our generation. The guy who trained him is probably the best known neurosurgeon in the world, who's now retired, named Robert Spetzler. And Michael, incredibly talented guy. Probably the most, not only is he incredibly talented, he's incredibly hard. Has written multiple textbooks, flies all over the world, has pushed his own self to does incredible things in the OR, like really, really talented person. And I respect him. And when the Netflix thing came out, after about 6 months, he said, "So what are you going to do? What are you going to do with all this, attention?"
Right.
Like what's your next move? As if I had it planned. Like Mike never would have done this without a plan. That's just who Mike is. Mm-hmm. He's just that kind of guy. He's that, this and then this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. That's what ambitious people do. And this all, I don't think it's a negative. It's just what you do when you really want to be successful.
Yeah.
I'm just not like that. Most people like me never would have just gone with their chairman at some crappy hospital in the Upper East Side and taken a shot coming out of residency. Who would have given up? I had a lab at Penn. I had a great job. I was married to my first wife. What in the hell am I going to New York for? Mm-hmm. That's just me. I said, okay, I'm going to try this. It was crazy. And look, I left my wife because of it. My whole life changed. And now I never would have met my new wife. I never would have had my daughter. I never would have been on Netflix. I never would have been in Netflix. And you think of all this, sliding doors.
Right. It's a cascade of events.
Yeah.
What made you change your emphasis on where you wanted to put your energy in medicine? Because it sounded like you were this kind of gunner coming up. Your office is plastered with awards and all that. You can't see on the cameras, but it is. And then you made, I don't want to say like an altruistic move, but you definitely have benefited this community a lot because of the roots you planted here. And it's going to well supersede, your practice here. So what was the motivating factor there? Because you had a pretty comfy life.
I can't say there was one. I think I grew into it and grew into the role. I didn't, I came here to escape. I thought just unhappy people and perversely competitive environments that were driven selfishly, that weren't necessarily always doing the right thing. They're tending to do the politically expedient or money-making thing, or the thing that would get them ahead. There was no real teamwork. I didn't feel part of a greater good. I felt just like I was working hard, but I wasn't really happy going to work every day. Mm-hmm. And so this was more or less, look, I at one point I remember before I came here, I was like, it wouldn't be so bad just move to like a suburb of Rochester, New York, and take a job at a small hospital and just work for myself and just be alone and just build a practice.
Yeah.
It didn't seem, to me, it seemed, and sometimes I still think that would be fun. This is not me. I'm just too ambitious. I am. And I want to be impactful. I want to leave the world. I want to do something with myself. And I think I'd be really unhappy. I also know I have a lot of potential. And I know I have something to offer to the people I work with and to the field of neurosurgery and potentially beyond that now. And it took me time to gain that confidence that I really had something that was valuable to deliver upon. Because remember that we're in all these environments and we only see certain types of leaders and certain types of mentors. And then I would read books about leadership or mentorship or these, very high. I felt like I had a higher calling. And there was more to this than just doing a bunch of cases every day.
Right.
And it was a combination of those things. I think once I got here, then I had to learn how to be that person. And you can't be successful. It's great to have like words on the walls and everything, but those are really reflective of the things that get you to have the ability to be impactful. Mm-hmm. If you don't do those things, you're not even going to have the opportunity, because unfortunately those things matter. And there's a certain level that you have to get to just to even be in the game. Once you get there, you still have choices. I mean, there's some university programs in neurosurgery now, they would never consider me to be a chairman. And they're idiots, frankly, because I know I could run any program really well.
Right.
But because I just don't have the types of things they look for. They look for an R01 grant from the NIH, or they're looking for 5,000 publications rather than the number I have, or they want me to be on certain committees or be influential in some national organizations, be on the board of this or this thing or that thing. Why that helps you as a chairman, I have no idea. But part of it's that the deans and the universities have their own cultural ego. And like you want to recruit somebody that, whoa, this guy's from this place, and and they can write and then it makes them feel good about it, and they move on to the next one. And there's no way to prove whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. And most of these places that you're a cog in a wheel anyway. You're not asked to do other than keep the ball rolling downhill.
Right.
So the answer to that question is I think that I feel time spent here has allowed me to sort of test myself.
Yeah.
And I've gone home some nights and been uncomfortable, or I've had to learn how to be happy with other people's success and see, and not that I'm not successful, but the attention can't all be on me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes time, especially when you come from a background like I did, where everything is so me.
I think that's a hallmark of leadership, to bring other people up to the level you're at and maybe even to supersede you. It sounds like from your story, you kind of you try to get as far away from bureaucracy as you could. So you talked about that you feel like you have more of a higher calling than simply, scrubbing in every day and doing cases, being a cog in a wheel, pushing the ball down the hill. What do you feel like that higher calling is, or what does it look like it's going to be for you?
Well, I still like to operate, but what's fun now is I'll help my junior guys. I love to sort of come in and assist, or if they struggle, like helping them and teaching them. Teaching other attendings is great. I mean, because they're sometimes better surgeons than me. They just need more experience. Right. So it's been. I ask for myself. I ask for myself more. I'm not afraid of calling my junior guy. Hey, come take a look at this. What do you think? What would you do? I'm much more comfortable with that than I ever was before. Back then, when I was younger, it was almost like you're showing weakness. Now I think you're showing strength. Right. So by basically showing that and showing that you're humble, that getting other people's opinions, even though they're 20 years younger than you, setting an example, and leave that example behind. So I think that my feeling now is I don't have the same ambition to do the things I did before, because the things that I was doing before were more self-serving. However, I do still love to operate. So it's sometimes tough. Like, I still like to operate. And so, but being a leader means you're giving up some of the things you like to do. Yeah. And I know that that's true, but actual doing it is still hard. But I think the way stoicism has served me well is when I started reading about it, I just identified with it. Identified with the philosophy as a solution, or at least a partial solution to some of the problems I confronted.
What is the Stoic philosophy, just if you were to define it in your own words?
A lot of people ask me that because I'm so infatuated with it. Well, there's basically, the core elements are just to do the right thing, that there's perception, will, and action, that your perceptions are what they are, and that they're often wrong. Okay. That your way, whatever, just assume people are trying to screw you, and presume that's your perception. They may be or may not be. You don't have control over it. So you only can do what you can control. So your will should always be to do the right thing, no matter what the perception is. That your actions are a function of doing the right thing. So that means that you're focused on what you can control. You're living in the moment, not regretting things happened in the past. You're not afraid of taking risk and overcoming obstacles, because that's part of life. There are going to be failures, that you're entitled to fail. That's the way you learn. That's the way you improve. You don't fail, you don't improve. And then there are 4 tenets of Stoicism, that to live a life of virtue, you have to have temperance, courage, wisdom, and justice. And so if you can live within those no one's perfect. Right. So you can't, there's no such thing as I still get upset at things. Yeah. I think no one's going to be the perfect Stoic. And I think the Stoic doesn't mean that you don't have emotion. Right. It doesn't mean you don't care. It just means that you don't overreact, or that you don't react negatively, or that your actions are not just based on your perceptions only. And I think that kind of sums it up. It's I've read a lot, and I'm writing my book. Basically, is about, and I haven't got the book accepted for public. I'm still writing. I have to still get a publisher. But the concepts are that medicine kind of go like what we were talking about. As a resident, or even when you're training, no one teaches you about your mindset.
Right.
And we're all taught about what to do with our hands, and we're taught technical things. We're taught how to overcome this thing and that thing, how to interpret this and how to operate. But we're never really taught how to think, or how to what your perception might be, and what your mindset should be, and what happens when you fail. And we're all going to fail at some point, everybody, over and over again. No one really, and our national organizations don't address this even very well. Everyone's showing all these great things they've done.
Right.
There's an element of now showing complications, or showing my worst complication, but it's still kind of, the vast majority is not like that. And so the book's about the kind of things that drive us, especially when we're young, are all selfish. That there is no sense of understanding or training on these, how to overcome the problems that we undoubtedly will overcome in order to learn how to be a brain surgeon. And that stoicism provides a outlet for these things. Now, admittedly, I really wasn't ready to write a book right away, because I just wasn't passionate enough about it. And when I got hurt, I got hurt. You know the story?
I'm not familiar.
Oh, so I read around the Ryan Holiday books, which are he's the sort of modern Stoic author.
Familiar.
I've written like 3 of his books. He Was the Enemy, Courage, and Obstacles. Or Courage is the Cure, Obstacles are the Answer, or something like that. And I've read all of them, and I had this book with me, the Meditations book, when I was skiing this past January, about 6 months ago.
Okay.
I was skiing with a friend of mine and just woke up on the ground quadriplegic. So I was face down on the ground, and I couldn't feel my arms.
Really?
And I had to listen. My head was to the side. I broke my neck. I knew my neck was broken. I was a neurosurgeon. I was done. Just gave up. I was finished.
Wow.
So I was lying there, and I just kind of, for about 40 minutes or so, until ski patrol came and sort of went. That was the beginning.
So what are you thinking? You're at the bottom of the hill. You can't move anything, and your line of work is working to help people in the condition that you've now found yourself. But what are you sitting there thinking?
I was done.
Yeah.
I was pretty much. I gave up. I said, okay, I've had a good career. Lennox will be okay. John will take over. I've done everything I can. I had no regrets. I actually, after I was really sad, I at the beginning I was just in shock. I was like, I can't believe I did this over and over again. How did I do this to myself? But my neck really hurt. It was really painful. And but then I kind of calmed down. I can't say that I thought I have to be like a Stoic, but part of the reading and it imbues you. You start to think about problems and obstacles. I said, I just remember thinking, okay, I don't remember if I thought I could only control what I could control, but I knew I couldn't control anything. So I was like a head in a stick. I was doing nothing.
Right.
So when ski patrol finally came, I said, listen, I'm a neurosurgeon. I was really calm. I'm a neurosurgeon. I broke my neck. I've got a high cervical cord injury. I was still breathing, so I knew up to about C4 was okay, but I couldn't move my arms at all. I think I could shrug my shoulders, but that doesn't mean anything. Your cranial nerves, not your cervical cord. So I said, I broke my neck. I've got a cervical cord injury, and you got to fly me off the mountain. So she goes, what? I told her again. She goes, are you sure you're a neurosurgeon? Like, yeah. So I'm lying on the face down.
Yeah.
And she calls her dispatch and tells him there's a nurse guy. He says he's a neurosurgeon. So they flew me off the mountain. And I think that I had not done that and been calm. Maybe I was freaking out or something, or didn't feel the confidence to tell her what I think they should do.
Yeah.
And just let them take me down the sled. Who knows? I had an unstable neck. I had a cervical fracture. I ruptured the anterior ligament. I had a bad cervical. It's called the central cord syndrome. It's a congenitally narrow spinal canal with arthritic changes. And I bruised my cord. But on the helicopter, I started getting moving back a little bit. I could move my fingers and I could tap my toes together. And I ended up flying me to Denver. My hospital system flew me home a few days later. I was stable in a collar. They flew me home in an air ambulance and had my surgery here with my guys, and was in rehab for a couple of weeks and was discharged from on February 18th. And while I was in the hospital, I realized that I lost all anxiety, something about a near-death experience or whatever that was. I was unconscious for a few minutes. When I woke up, I went through this horrible feeling of life ending, basically. I think that would have been worse than death, honestly, living as a quadriplegic in some ways.
Sure.
I would have liked to say I was going to be okay.
Right.
I would have liked to have been like Christopher Reeve or something, and who knows what his real life was like. That's the problem. But it couldn't have been good. It is one of the most. It's not good to have to live like that.
Yeah.
So I think one of my close friends who's very Catholic, who's a Jesuit, I think, said to me, you had an angel on your shoulder. And I never believe, I'm not really particularly religious, and I don't believe in angels, but I do feel after that, when I was in this, my mind cleared. I was never a particularly anxious person, but I would wake up in the middle of the night once in a while, just thinking about stupid stuff, and I can't remember what it was when I wake up in the morning, but it's gone. I have no anxiety anymore, no anxiety at all.
After having confronted your own death?
I guess, I still, I don't even think I get as pissed off as I used to about certain things. But I think that that combination of having read this kind of stuff before, then having a couple of months to recover from my injury, losing this kind of the voice in your head, going away and staying away for the most part, allowed me to have a clarity on some things I never had clarity on. And that's why I decided to write the book. I was like, okay, wow, this is really amazing. I want to write about, it's not like I saw the white light or anything, but what I did see was I saw a way to live your life that is based on my understanding the value of kind of the application of stoicism to, and I don't think people should train this way. And I think what I'm doing is breaking it out into my training and then my accident and and then my reading of stoicism and how impactful it's been, and then going back to the accident and the recovery and how I felt, this new way of thinking, and that I look back on my career and there were 4 instances of patients where I learned wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance from. So I'm writing about each one.
Yeah,
either they're like vignettes or memoirs on essentially bad outcomes. Well, the first 3 are. The justice one is a little bit different, but we're writing that now. But I think it's a memoir / self-help book for, I think, whether you're a doctor or anything. I think you might be interested in it. And I think because I have a reasonable size social media following for a physician, that there's not an insignificant chance of it getting accepted, because that's all they look for. If I hadn't had the Netflix show and I had as many Instagram followers as I have, I don't think they'd be as interested. And that's just the way it is. So I'd like to take advantage of the accident and the Netflix show all in one.
Well, I mean, I think, you have the credentials to stand on your own 2 feet. I think you have a lot of wisdom, like genuine wisdom to offer, because you've had such a rich life.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you was about, so as a neurosurgeon, as a physician in general, you come across life and death, but I don't think in the same way that you do in neurosurgery. And I would imagine that that's part of the reason that attracted you to neurosurgery. And you've just finished telling me a story about your own life or death experience, which I think actually might be an even better story than the one I was hoping to get from you. But I was going to ask you, so you've dealt with people who are dealing with these tumultuous life happenings. They're going through what could be the last few months of their life. They're not sure. In those final moments, what are your patients thinking about? Because as a young person like myself, you're so gung ho on the future, and I'm healthy, and I'm not thinking about my life in that way. But you open the brain every day. You see the organ that produces consciousness, and you deal with these people who are going through things that may end their life. What are your musings on life and death as a neurosurgeon?
Well, first of all, I think we are never putting our own lives at risk when we're operating on people. In fact, the courageous one is the patient who's like letting them be open their head. I mean, think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're taking the risk, not me. In fact, Alex Honnold, who's the free solo climber, was at one of our meetings. I wrote this in my book too. That we talked to him afterwards, and he was talking about how he feels fear. And Alex Honnold, if he makes a single mistake, he dies. Like a mistake, he's finished, done, kaput. Now we're never in that situation.
Fair.
So what the situation we're in is we have to make sure that we are doing the best we can and that we are doing the right thing for our patients. And you have to make sure that you train the best, that you have the best resources that you have. You only can put yourself out there. And it's, the truth is that that's the other thing about building this place is I didn't have the best things right at the beginning. So could I really, the case I want to do, I did them. That we didn't have all the equipment yet. We didn't have the best ICU.
Yeah.
And I still did them. I still took that risk. And that's retrospectively, that's part of what you do in your life as a neurosurgeon. You push to learn how to be a neurosurgeon. If you're right out of residency, the first few cases, I'm not as good as now as I was then. So I was sort of doing that. That's part of what happens. But when it's at this level, when you think about it, like, is that right? Is that ethical?
Well, the Alex Honnold thing, I mean, if he makes a mistake, it was his own voluntary action that cost him his own life.
Right.
In your case, if you make a mistake, it's your voluntary action that costs someone else's life.
Right. So I think that in the end, that's true. And so that there's inherently something different about that.
Right.
In fact, when I've had mistakes or when I've had complications, and I've had them, some bad ones, they can live with me for a long time. They never really go away. I remember all of them. It's far easier to remember the ones that fail, the biggest screw-ups, the biggest, I wouldn't say even screw-ups. I don't think no one has ever done poorly with me that I do something that I was the wrong thing to do. Was the indication wrong, or should I never have operated on them? All these people needed something done. And that's the fallacy about this, is that, well, if I didn't operate on them, then who knows what it doesn't mean they wouldn't have done any better. But by the same token, when you're the proximate cause for a problem, you are responsible. You're held responsible. You should be. But I do think that I have to live with that. And all neurosurgeons or anybody that takes care of sick patients or risky problems, we all talk about that. And the fact that our lives and our clinical success is built on the gravestones of the people we've lost. And it's true. You learn from some of the disasters you've had. So it's the nature of going through that makes this such an interesting lifestyle. And some people just don't care and don't think this deeply about it, frankly. So,
well, on the show, it's very evident that you put your game face on when you're in the OR. But you say in multiple instances, it's Cliff that this gets you very emotional.
Yeah.
It means a lot to you. So where do you put that? You said it never goes away. You remember, the faces of all these individuals, and yet you show up every day with a great attitude, and you have to. It's not like a job where you can show up and kind of half-ass it, and then the job still gets done. Your job's not really like that.
Look, I don't think I'm a typical neurosurgeon. When some people who knew me, when I decided to become a neurosurgeon, like, you're doing what? What are you, out of your mind? Because I'm not the typical neurosurgeon.
Why?
I was just a little too sensitive, too much empathy.
Oh,
none of these guys are not particularly sensitive. They're not particularly. It's just in general. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you know what? I always say, look, if you had a doctor who is the best in the world neurosurgeon, never had a complication, every single one of his cases turned out perfectly, and you had a really complicated brain tumor problem, and you had that guy. Now, this person doesn't exist, but just as a kind of example, 100% of his patients did perfect. He never, ever failed. But he was a total prick, wouldn't talk to you, never called you back, didn't care about you because he knew you'd do well, so what does he care? Never answered questions, never even saw you after surgery. didn't just operate on you and that was it. And say you were comparing him, you had to choose which surgeon to go to.
Yeah.
Him or a guy that was 90% effective, who was a super nice guy,
Yeah.
who was really empathetic, who called you back, who gave you his phone number, who was a human. I guarantee that at least 90% of people would go to the 100% guy.
Fair.
Right?
Yeah.
So the truth is, the fact of the matter is that a lot of reputation is bullshit. That the same things that make you think somebody is the greatest surgeon are the same reasons why you shouldn't go to them. Yet they create aura around themselves, and it's hard to know who the best people are. And certainly, being empathetic and sympathetic is not one of them. It's just never.
Right.
And you could. So the answer is that's why. And truth is, it probably isn't helpful. In general, it's probably not that important to the success in our business, or else more people would be like this. And it's frankly hard, when you really feel empathy for people and you're hurting them, or you see there's some sort of destruction that you've caused. It's just hard to wake up in the morning sometimes.
Yeah.
I sometimes wish I wasn't like that.
I think your patients benefit because of it. I honestly, I wasn't expecting to receive this definition of leadership from you, because I came here to interview you largely about leadership, your experience, career, and all that, the Netflix stuff, of course. And I'm leaving with the sense of it's okay to be empathetic. It's good to be a human. Do the right thing, regardless of kind of all the other things that are telling you to do otherwise, or the self-serving kind of model of existing. And I think that's really interesting coming from someone in your position. We're getting ready to pretty well just conclude the episode, but I want to ask you, what's your advice to someone my age or students, maybe not even in medicine, but to sort of discern that calling for themselves, to find that level of meaning that you found in your life?
Well, first thing is have a calling. That's number one. I think very often young kids are attracted to fame or money, or that's the whole Marcus Aurelius thing, that fame, money, power doesn't really matter in the end. That these are material things. It's not wrong to seek them, by the way. Stoics don't say you shouldn't seek them. It's just they're not good nor bad. If they happen, great. If they that's easy. It makes life easy, because those are not measures of your value as a human. And so the advice is to find your North Star, find a thing, and don't worry about the other stuff. The other stuff will come. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least you're waking up every day to do something you love to do. And you find passion in it, and you're not looking at your watch, and you really feel like you're challenged, and you feel like you're making a difference. That's what makes a human being not an animal. That, the different things that separates us from non-humans are that they sleep all day and eat all day. That's all they do. You're a human. You're actually supposed to do something every day. That's what really makes us human.
Yeah. So
go do something. And so whatever that is, find it. And I think it's hard these days. I do. I think, look, 100 years ago, you could have been a carpenter, or you could have worked with your hands, or you could have been, there's so many different trades. And there was no internet, and there was no, the thing even back before the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
That's why there wasn't so much mental disease back then. People weren't as depressed. You actually got up and did something every day, and you had to. But I think this kind of embarrassment of wealth hasn't made us happier, and it hasn't. You could look as a society, you could see where we are now. This is a mess, and yet we have all these great things. So what does that tell you? And on a macro level, none of this makes people happy. It makes people angry and pissed, and they're attacking one another, and there's always two sides. It's enough. And I think that the biggest things that have screwed us up are social media, technology. These things have not been good. And so it doesn't mean you shouldn't use them.
Right.
It doesn't mean you shouldn't find the goodness in them, that it's all bad. It's just that they're not good nor bad. And so the advice is that it doesn't mean everybody should be a doctor or everybody should be a neurosurgeon. Don't get me wrong. But what's great about this is it's incredibly fulfilling. It's forever changing. It's always challenging. There are big mistakes. Those are great. that obstacles and failures are just wonderful. It's how you become more deep and how you learn. It's how you become a better person. And so you have to push your envelope, do things that are a little uncomfortable, take some risk. It's okay to fail. Like, failure is amazing. I've screwed up so many times, and you have to take some risk to be really successful. If you keep doing everybody else doing the easy, you take the easy way, and you say, I'm just going to do this because it's easy, and I know I can get paid, and I can live near my parents, and I know I'll get this, blah, blah, blah. You end up closing some doors, and then you become kind of a robotic, and all the decisions are like that. And then you wake up one day and like, what the hell am I on this earth for? I'm pretty much every day like, today's gonna be a good day. Like, and you wake up and you tell yourself that. And that's it. So I don't think it's great advice. It's coming from me. It's really easy now that I'm 59 years old and, telling young people they should live like me, but I didn't think like this when I was 29. And so I went through a life and I went through some things that have been super impactful, and I'm very grateful for that. I do get bummed out sometimes, or I used to. I still sometimes question some of the things I've done and how to continue to build on what I've accomplished, because I'm never going to stop. So I think complacency is bad, and I think it's important that you aren't complacent, that you are comfortable. Not being comfortable is a good thing.
I think that's fantastic. Do you have a title for your new book?
I had somebody ask me that. I don't have a title. At first I have to get a book deal, then I'll do a title.
Okay.
This is a process, and I think it's really valuable. I do. One of the book agents I talked to said I could either write about stoicism and write about philosophy, or I could write about a memoir. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I found a book agent that would allow me to do this. That'll support me.
I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, I have part of it done.
Oh, gladly. Please let me. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's great. Thanks for coming all this way.
Yeah, you're fantastic.